quick. Okay, so let's see here. What do I have for some questions? So before we jump off into it, I just wanted to bring up that I think some of our early talks, early on talks that we were having, I think some of those things are starting to come around. Like, for instance, we were talking about, gold, and that if things got to get too carried away and we were just going to, print our debt away, that we could print up a bunch of money and buy gold. And
I think that's what the central banks around the world are doing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we just witnessed a pretty large move from the LBMA, I guess, over here to the States, from what I'm hearing. Did you hear about that big move?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes from the Bank of England vaults. That's where a lot of the gold is physically vaulted.
Okay. And I mean, that's just such a large amount in such a short time there. It kind of makes me think that, that's what's happening, is they're just they're going to start using some of that printed up fiat to try to bring in a little bit of a base before things get too crazy. What do you think?
Well, we did see a bit of that, and I wish I'd taken better notes at the time. But during COVID, when the Federal Reserve was doing their bonanza of quantitative easing, gold did show up on one of the sheets of what they'd purchased. They were buying all sorts of stuff. They were buying shares in European companies. But I'm sure I saw one statement. I guess it's probably still on record somewhere. So I always found that fascinating at the time. They typed currency into existence and bought gold with it. I wish we could do that.
Right? That's it. But that's kind of what I was expecting might happen, and I think it's just really kind of starting to sink in for me that, despite the populace not really having a clue, what we were contemplating and discussing is definitely, we're seeing it take place on the grand scene, I think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a key point was the Bank of International Settlements declaring gold a tier 1 asset.
Yeah.
It wasn't just for the fun of it.
That's it. Exactly.
It was a reason that back then they were admitting that it's as good as the dollar then, and it's been replacing the dollar steadily. It's overtaken the euro as a reserve asset for central banks.
Yes. And what do you think? What do you think about the I guess, we did just close that gold window temporarily. What if they just came out and said, okay, temporary over, we're kicking back off, we just market to market?
Well, if you do the math, marking it to market doesn't really help much. So if we say we have 9,000 tons, and if you say it's worth $90,000 a kilo, and you work the math out, you get, I think it's 800 and something billion dollars. Divide that by the daily deficit spending, it will pay for the deficit for 140 days without touching the national debt. So marking it to market would be ineffective. If the whole world agreed that gold is now $29,000 a troy ounce, it still wouldn't pay for 4 years of deficit spending, all of our gold, if we had 9,000 tons.
So yeah, well, so run with me on this for a minute, because I was thinking about this a little bit. And so what if, like, if we just say we bought this big chunk of gold, and say that we do have the gold that we say we do.
Yeah.
And we say, okay, there's a couple different ways we could go, obviously, but let's just say right now we market to market.
Okay.
and we say, okay, we're obviously doing some radical stuff right now, trying to, at least per claim, work on our ridiculous spending. So if we marked it to market, though, that will officially alert the public that gold is not just some rock that we keep around because we had it at one time.
Yeah.
And it would continually be steadily bid up because, the debasement's going to continue on around the world. So, over time, it's just going to continue to rise and rise and rise.
Except that we're presuming that all of the existing perceived wealth will transfer into tangible assets, but it won't. Some will get destroyed. Now, whether that's 10%, 20%, 50%, 70%, I don't know, because the world is actually a lot poorer than it thinks it is. We have 55 times more units of currency worldwide than we had in 1980.
Yeah. Okay. And so before we get too complicated, deep, isn't it though, in my mind, like, obviously we have trillions of dollars that we've just kind of printed out of thin air that wasn't there originally. So I kind of call that fugazi dust, gas, whatever you want to.
Fugazi. Yeah.
Let's say it was only, I guess what I'm trying to get at, it doesn't really matter how much extra air they pumped into the system. If all of the world, like, all of the big countries of China and India and Russia and all these other nations, if they all have a basis of gold and we have a basis of gold, and then all of their citizens are on this gaseous fiat standard, it can kind of just, like, doesn't matter. You can almost just, it does to the citizenry, I get that, but as far as country to country, aren't we getting back down to the basics of reality of, okay, you have metals, you have gas and oil, you have wheat, you have the commodities, basically.
Yes.
So I would just, I guess when I look at it, that's what I see as the big pull the rug out from everybody is, they're all re-hypothecating their gold. And
so let's look at it. Let me give you an example that might help work through this. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, was it Yeltsin or Gorbachev? One of them decided to carve up into shares all of the state-run industries and give an equal share to all of the people. Okay. Most of the people didn't know what this was for, or they just sold it for virtually nothing. And a few people gathered it all up, hence the Russian oligarch system, where a few people own the bulk of all industry.
Okay.
So it's human nature, whatever the situation, that a few people seem to end up with all of the wealth.
Right.
So carry that on through to the fiat system we're in. The units of fiat currency are fictional until they get converted into something real. So say somebody's worked 40 years and they've got their IRA and it's showing $1 million. Now, if the dollar, or when the dollar loses 50, 60, 70% of its purchasing power, that person's pension cannot pay them for what they expected it to pay them in terms of food, mortgage, rent, holiday, car, you name it.
Right.
Can't do it.
Right.
Because that wealth doesn't exist, because its digits
indeed
could potentially buy something in the future at a very much more unknown price than people realize.
Right. I'm with you so far. Yeah.
So therefore, that person who thought they could retire, so they thought they had wealth in the future, that disappears. It just disappears.
Right.
The currency dies.
Right.
So they never had that wealth in the first place. You've only actually have the wealth if you've actually turned it into goods or services or physical items.
Yes.
if it's digits on a server in a desert or wherever these servers are, it can vaporize as quick as a puddle of water would in that desert, and it will. So the whole thing about revaluing and using the gold and stabilizing it in a path to something sensible, there isn't a path.
To the common person, I mean, I can kind of see that, but again, can't we just drop all of that off as far as for? Because I kind of almost see it as
works. It would work for everybody who doesn't have anything, who owns no property, has no savings, just rents and lives paycheck to paycheck. Well, they initially won't be any worse off when all of the digital wealth disappears. But it's the people who've stored up thinking they're being responsible and sensible for the future, and those are the people who'll be really hurt.
Yes, like everybody with a 401k right now, and all of that, those paper assets, which is what is taking place literally. Like if the clock just keeps, or the game just keeps being played as is right now, that's what I see happening to the U.S. populace, at least, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, whether if we just continue where we are right now, it'll be the inflation that does us in. If we keep printing to cover over all of this nonsense, our 401ks, although the numbers may be there, it's
the purchasing power won't be.
Yeah.
And Greenspan, I mean, I've said it many times. Alan Greenspan was asked, can the US government cover its future unfunded liabilities? And he said, of course they can, because they can just create the currency and send a check out. And then he paused and he said, but what they won't be able to do is guarantee what that check will buy. So that's just a blatant admission. Of course the government can't honor its obligations.
So do you not, I guess I'm just kind of thinking but since I realize that it's all just a bunch of Fugazi gas out there.
Yeah.
I don't see why, and I kind of do, like you're saying, like whoever has nothing will have nothing. If you have a yacht and a house, you'll still have a yacht and a house. But
except with real estate, we're seeing it already, excessive increases in property taxes.
Why is that happening? Can you explain?
Illinois, I heard an example. In Illinois, somebody had 90-something acres of woodland, and it was classed, and it was costing them $700 a year for property taxes. And then they enforced a reclassification that was actually residential amenity land now, not woodland or whatever the classification was, and their property taxes went from $700 to $11,000.
Wow.
Now, if you haven't got that $11,000 this year, next year, and the year after, and forever rising, you've got to sell your piece of land, haven't you?
Yeah.
So now you don't own your piece of land. What have you got? You've got fiat currency.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got the great taking and then some Fugazi.
We've been taken. I think it's happened. The trap is set. It will spring shut. Whether it's 50, 60, 70% of the population will get caught, probably. It's hard. I mean, as stackers, we've made reasonable provision. I think we've done the best we can, haven't we, for the future of our family? For our spouses, for our families, for our parents, whatever. So it doesn't fill me with any smug satisfaction that I'll probably be okay when 9 out of 10 people won't be.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So in a way, and I don't think I ever thought I'd hear myself say this, I would rather this Ponzi scheme would carry on a bit longer before it really breaks down. But I think we're at the point now, probably we're close to the catastrophic collapse if we inflate too much more. And the choice of ceasing to inflate will cause a collapse, not as catastrophic, but still a collapse that will be catastrophic for most people. And I was sort of having this internal conversation, like, is there a rocky road to a good future, or is there no road?
Yeah.
You know, and whilst we've got this upward movement of wealth and people not being paid really reflecting their labor, you add that to the situation of massive wealth destruction. As a nation, I don't know if there is a route to something sound. Individually, absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who's made reasonable provision in the precious metals will be okay.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting going forward for sure. You know, we have the tech sector, the AI sector and computer robotics and stuff claiming they're going to take over
production. Yeah.
So take over jobs, take over production, take over.
And at the same time, every household will spend $30,000 on a robot.
Yeah. I mean, who?
Well, that's not going to happen, is it? You see, in a consumer economy, if you destroy the consumer, you destroy the economy.
Yes, and I, you know, that's what I'm seeing. But you know, I'm also wondering, what if it's, you know, if this AI thing kicks off, like we're thinking, and the people really do, they're pretty much clueless, and they're pretty much used to. I mean, they've tasted stimmy checks. And I wonder, can we just roll over into this false world and everybody rolls right into it? Like
we might just well get a division between rural economies and dense urban economies. There may actually be. I mean, there's been many films, haven't there, written about the future, where you have that, you have the dense urban areas where people are controlled and kept it, and then kept constrained, literally. I'm gonna guess a little bit of view into that is the 5-minute cities or something, where you, 15 minutes. Everything you need is where you are, so you stay where you are. So I don't know, maybe it will play out like that. I can't see the rural, more independent areas going along with even ever more draconian measures, but then again, look what's happening to the farmers. I mean, this tariff situation. The last time tariffs were increased on food imports, I think the government collected $54 billion as a sales tax, basically. And they gave 24 billion as compensation to the farmers who'd lost the 50 billion. So tariffs don't work unless possibly they're evenly distributed to the people who have lost out because of the tariffs, the businesses that have lost their export opportunities. And as a nation, we're an exporter of food. So we produce overall surplus food. So what the existing production can't be consumed within the country. And if we upset too many more people with tariffs, we're going to see, now there is a point, I know it sounds a bit convoluted, but we're going to see more and more small farms pushed into bankruptcy and having to sell up. Now, who's going to buy those farms? It will be Vanguard, BlackRock, the Gates Foundation, or however Bill Gates buys his farmland. Mm-hmm. So we'll have land. The means of production of food will move upwards, ever concentrated as well. So that doesn't bode that well for rural areas either, does it?
No, and with as much imports and trading as we do, we're relying so much. Like even pharmaceuticals are hugely imported.
Yeah, the precursors for pretty well the whole industry come from China. Yeah.
So I can imagine that bringing in some chaos and pain, and
Yeah.
yeah, it makes me wonder all these things. You know how I was talking back in our old interviews, you know, they're doing what they can to kick out the legs of the table of the USA. And
It would seem that way, wouldn't it?
that's what, you know, it just seems like, you know, and what I was saying about there being this bigger plan, all of, you know, for me, I still just seems to be backing my thought process up, you know, and instead of thinking, oh, I'm way off track there, it seemed that's still where I'm leaning. And so I kind of see this as a plan. I am very interested in the goal and how that's going to tie in with the average person. Oh, and since we're on that subject, what everybody's saying, oh, the gold is the people's.
No.
On the news and on the you know, oh, well, you deserve to know what's in Fort Knox because it's your money anyway, they're saying. Like, that's being said quite a few times over. And
it's supposed to be, isn't it? I mean, the government is holding it for. I mean, the government is supposed to be a servant to the people.
Well, so when I was tracking it back, like, okay, if I said when we were on a gold standard and all the families had, you know, $1,000 worth of gold in their banking account, and it was gold, and then we switched over to paper,
yeah,
and so they, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so they collected that gold during the well, we'll just call it a confiscation for ease of use. And they get all the gold in a pile at Fort Knox and these other places. And you could say, okay, well, that's the people's gold because you know, it was okay. Well, so I can follow that, but how much did the government have at that time?
Well, the government shouldn't actually own anything. They're supposed to be wise and benevolent custodians. The government shouldn't own anything.
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
And no government employee, no senator, representative, president, whatever, should ever leave service richer than the total sum of their salary.
Yeah, well, we know that gig is up.
Yeah, I mean, but around the world, I mean, somebody mentioned about Putin. He wears a $500,000 watch. Okay. Well, Putin has only ever worked for the government the whole of his life.
Sure.
So how's he wearing a $500,000 watch? And how's he got $200 billion estimated wealth?
Right. I mean, you can look
on
at
a salary.
Any of these government working people and look at their salary to oppose of what they've become since they got in, and it's ridiculous.
And what can happen eventually? I mean, I don't know if you remember. I remember watching the revolution in Romania. I don't know if you've seen any of the footage, but they chased down Ceausescu and hung him.
Really?
Yeah. The Romanians were just fed up. They'd been beaten down so much. The wealth had moved up to such an extent. They had nothing left really to lose. So there was a revolution.
Wow. They hung him when they
and Ceausescu and a lot of the cronies were, summarily dispatched. So will it get that bad in this beautiful country? I hope not.
Right.
Because then you just end up potentially with something like the French Revolution where, you know, a lot of good people were guillotined.
So let's walk the people's gold through a little bit further.
Oh, can I just make a comment to Welsh Coast Services there?
Yeah.
So my understanding of history, when the French Queen said, "Let them eat cake" through the fence as the people were rioting, from what I understand, there was no food left in the palace, nothing apart from some cake. And she sent the order, "Give them the cake." And the history has been written that she was being arrogant, saying, "Oh, go eat cake." But what she was actually saying is, the only food we have left in the palace is cake. Give it to them. So it's interesting how words can be completely changed throughout history, if that is the case. But also the French Revolution, from what I understand, the main cause behind it was the impoverishment of France, because they were spending so much stirring up trouble for the British in the colonies over here. Ironically, they were trying, spurring on the settlers to get their freedom from the British crown and the tyranny that was resulting from that, whilst having their own aristocracy and tyranny in France. So it was sort of an interesting turn.
Interesting.
Sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, no. So if it was,
I'm going to interrupt again. Yeah,
okay.
John Law. So he's really relevant. So he was a Scottish dude, and he convinced the king to give him the power to create the currency for France, and it was backed by land in the Mississippi, where France owned a lot of the US in that area, and they were supposed to get resources and just make out like bandits. And so the currency was backed on shares on land, and that actually never really did produce much. So John Law created a fiat currency, and it got debased into pretty well non-existence. And he was captured fleeing the scene of his crime of destroying the whole French economy. Guess what is in his carriage? It was gold and silver coin. He was making off with gold and silver.
Wow.
But interesting, in France, they did the same again. They did this twice, just over 70 years between them. And France actually never really recovered as a country. They're incredibly inventive people. They've got great land, great farmland, incredible history, scientific and engineering expertise. They never actually recovered from those two complete destruction of the economy, because what happens when the economy becomes so financialized and it collapses, it takes out a lot of good stuff as well. It destroys a lot of good businesses. So I don't know whether we're going to see that here. Anyway, I'll let you get back. I'll try not to interrupt again. Sorry.
No worries. No, jump in whenever you're seeing something. Well, yeah, that brought up another question I had. So when they were talking about taking the asset side of the balance sheet and making it work for you, he later comes out and says, no, I wasn't talking about gold.
Okay.
But what would you take of that? Like taking land, like how do they make it work for you? They loan it out or something, or?
You mean the U.S. government to get round the debt?
Well, yeah, that's what he said. We're going to take the asset side of the
and monetize them.
Well, he didn't say monetize. He said make it work for us. And that's what I'm like.
I guess we could just trash all of the national parks, cut all the lumber down, mine the crap out of them, shoot all the animals. I guess we could just destroy every piece of nature, extract the value out of it. That would work for a few years. I don't really understand what he was talking about, basically.
Okay.
Unless they talk about leasing assets out to get an income on them.
Yeah, I didn't know. I mean, obviously gold popped to mind as like, okay. And let's talk a minute on that, because there's a lot of confusion on that. And I don't know, maybe you might not know. I don't know. But okay, so would they get even money if they just market to market, if it's at $42 on the books?
42 is, it's 42.22 recurring. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So let's just round it 42 for rough.
Yeah.
If we market to market at 3,000, do you take the 2,000 plus dollars and make it like, can you pocket that just because now suddenly you have it? Like, is that saying, okay, now I have X amount of value there?
Yeah, but if you do the math, if you market to market, it's only, I did the rough math, it's around 140 days of current deficit spending. And
okay,
that's
well, yeah, but let's not look at it like that. Like, just I'm trying to answer the question of if they say they don't have, say they're looking for ways to get cash in hand that they can spend on something or put on their balance as positive money.
Yep.
Can just by remarking it to value and you make, you know,
no,
$2,960, does that just go to your, you can't just say, okay, now I have $2,960 cash here because that value wasn't there before, but now it is. You see?
Well, this is the whole lie, isn't it, behind the system of liabilities and assets, and the Federal Reserve basically lie, and they say it doesn't matter how much the debt is because the government gets a surplus interest on it, and it has a neutral effect, except that the principal keeps piling up. You know, if somebody said to me, you've got the choice, you can have so much income and no debt, or you can have $36.5 trillion of debt and still the same income, I'd take the no debt and the income. It doesn't.
Well,
so
definitely for the populace. I mean, we're getting
so the maximum instant stimulus, instant use you could get for the gold would be 140 days of deficit spending, and it wouldn't touch the debt. And then after 140 days, we'd be back to 6 billion deficit spending per day. And to put these sums into context, I don't know how many government people are going to be laid off, but for every 44,000 average government employees that you lay off, that's 1 day of deficit spending. 1 day. So if you start putting zeros in front of that, 440,000. So let's say we sack 440,000 government workers. Okay, that's 10 days. So for 10 days, we'll break even. It's like, it doesn't work. There's nothing we can cut to even quell the bleed of deficit spending. And part of the reason behind that, the system is designed, it has to keep expanding. So you have to keep creating more currency units to pay the interest on the previously created currency units.
Yes.
So part of this expansionary system has been the ever expansion of government. That's where some of this funny money has gone. But it has to be created, and it has to go somewhere, or the whole thing collapses. And I don't think Scott Bessent, I don't think Elon Musk, and I definitely don't think our president comprehends the principle that if you stop inflating the inflationary system, it will collapse. There's no surgical way. There's no easy, well, we'll cut a bit of this, we'll cut a bit of that, and everything will be fine. The system collapses because it reveals the fallacy of all the currency units that have been created and haven't been spent yet. But people presume they've got that wealth, so that obviously affects their behavior. If people realize all of their currency units saved up for future use will have no or little purchasing power, they immediately stop spending now. And that's what's happening. People who've lost their jobs or fear of losing their jobs stop spending. All discretionary spending ceases. And as soon as that happens, the system collapses. I just don't think there's enough life left in the system unless there's something dramatic like a digital dollar system and an existing dollar system. There's not enough for one last printing, one last quantitative easing cycle, one massive, I don't know, $10-20 billion. I think that would bring on the catastrophic collapse. So we're at that point. We're very close between collapsing or catastrophic collapse. And for most people, there is no real difference.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then when we're talking about market to market, and then on your other side of your hand, you have, okay, let's just do the old pull the oh, I can't think of his name right now, but he's always talking. Well, you know, doesn't matter what the overspending is. Well, you just bring gold to that value. So, you know, 50 grand an ounce or whatever.
Yeah, but that would have to be a worldwide decision, wouldn't it? I mean, so if we mark, if everybody around the world agrees that gold is now $29,000 an ounce, and we sold all of our gold, that will pay for under 4 years deficit spending. Won't touch the debt. So what do you do then?
Well, let's say a little bit.
Your gold is gone. You're still spending $6 billion a day more than you're bringing in as income.
Yeah, but see what? Yeah, but if you look at it as like you're saying, if you go if the because it has to be kind of an agreed upon thing amongst nations, and I mean to me, I mean to be honest, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at China stacking like crazy. I'm looking at India stacking like crazy. Forever they've stacked. I mean, and we at one point at least had the most gold because through the wars we got it sent to us for safety, and then we were the backing of the so.
Yeah.
If our underlying system is a distributed ledger, as the Bitcoiners like to say, there's your distributed ledger.
Okay.
And yes, there's a lot of debt per the citizens, but governments don't necessarily generally care so much about the citizens. So let's just for the fun of it set them aside.
Right.
The Fugazi is Fugazi. Like we already shut down or froze Russia's Fugazi in the system.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're still going. And I guess that's kind of what we were talking about is when it shuts down, you're gonna, if you have something, you'll have it. If you don't, you have nothing, because you know that all the Fugazi is just gone now. Poof.
Yeah.
Well, the countries still have that same underlying base. And one country is not necessarily that. Let's say China and America and India have the same amount of gold.
Yeah.
Now, for them, they'd have to sell their gold to us to pay their debt down. We sell our gold to them to pay it. Boom, paid down, but we still have the same amount of gold. So, I mean, that's kind of my point is like and that's what makes sense to me about the BRICS. And, you know, I'm not trying to cause a headache for you or nothing. I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to work this through logically, you know, with someone who is willing to work with me here.
So then if you strip away fiat currency and you look at what does a population need to survive, food, energy, and housing, clothing. Yeah. So America is an net exporter of food and energy. So we could be fine. Nobody need to starve to death in America. Nobody need to be hungry.
Well, that's kind of what.
But now you're talking. You see now, you know, obviously I'm a Brit and an American. Now most Americans would freak out at the idea of redistributing wealth. But if the option is to have people starving in the streets, is that a good option to lose your population? Now, Bill Gates would argue, yeah, we need a depopulation event. We need to lose 90% of the population.
True.
That's a bit harsh, isn't it, on your neighbors?
For me and you, yeah, I don't think that.
It's a bit harsh on your friend who's morbidly overweight and can't work. Well, I guess they'd take it doesn't really. It's almost sort of machinations that what is being proposed. I was talking to a friend today, and he was saying, "Don't you like Elon Musk's cuts?" You know, and I thought, well, if you're cutting fraud and you're cutting genuine unnecessary spending, that's fine. But as I said earlier, I don't think Elon Musk or Donald Trump or Scott Bessent or anybody in the government actually understands if we stop expanding, we collapse. And there's a great risk now. And of course, you could say, well, yeah, bring it on, and it will be less painful to have it now than later. But most humans have an aversion to pain and uncomfortable decisions, and will put them off if they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what those are the big questions. And when I'm looking at, like, because they lie and cheat and steal and have slowly robbed our wealth over all these years anyway, it's not like,
Yep.
their underlying basis is moral or anything. So
no, I mean, a lot of the concentration of wealth comes from dishonest acts, for sure. I've often wondered, when you drive around, you think, well, how did somebody end up owning all of that? What did they do? How high to end up owning all of that?
yeah.
And sometimes it's being more ruthless than anybody else, being willing to do stuff that most people won't do, I guess.
For sure, that happens a lot. Yeah.
And the answer definitely isn't communism, but we haven't got capitalism, where the banking side of capitalism, it's socialized, isn't it? Their risk is socialized and their gains are private.
Yes. Yeah.
So we don't get that privilege, do we?
No.
If we take a risk and it goes wrong, we have to eat it.
Yeah. Well, in my mind, how I talked before in those old, and I think the power comes up from up above. I'm kind of wondering if they're not walking us into this system, and we're seeing it. It's just seeing the end of it is the tough thing. But we're definitely walking into a new era. Like, I don't think anyone, unless you're sleeping, can't tell that there's some majorly big changes happening worldwide.
It's rapid. It's a rate of change as well, which is another thing that catches people out.
And I'm wondering,
by the time people realize it's too late to do anything.
Yeah, and and to that point, if they do revalue gold, boom, everybody's locked out. And the same thing's going to happen. The same thing's going to happen with the rest of the metals when that happens. Don't you think? I think anyway. I think if the gold, even if they just leave it and let the system continue to accumulate, gold is on its way up anyway. And at some point, like, Russia has made silver now a strategic asset. Copper.
I think that's old news, in as much I remember seeing a video. I think it was Putin showing off one of their gold vaults, and in the background there was 10 times as much silver. So he was in front of pallets of gold, and there was literally a whole wall of silver behind it. So sure. I think they've been doing that for a long time.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me. I guess just my point is, I think this artificial inflation, or holding it down artificially for so long, is going to come to a head quickly, and then boom, your citizenry is locked out again. Like, they've been deceived out of it so far, in my opinion. Even though they could buy it, but to me, it's been a deception. And then if they revalue, boom, they're locked out now financially.
Well, you look in just the last year, 35-40%, depending, just on the rolling year, we're over 30% on gold and silver. That's a pretty dramatic drop in the purchasing power of the dollar, isn't it?
Yes.
9% is bad enough when you start compounding that.
Especially when when you're already close to barely making payments monthly, and your food prices going up, your energy prices going, when all those other prices are rising too, that already eats in. Plus, like you say, a 30% increase on gold and silver.
It's always a mix. Some people say, and I've said it, and I think I was mistaken, gold doesn't move. It just moves through history with the same sort of purchasing power. Well, it's not actually correct. I think there's periods where it is drastically undervalued, and there's periods where it starts to make up at a faster rate against the currency debasement. So it ebbs and flows. It's not a straight line.
Right.
And I still think it's undervalued compared to the dollar.
Yes. Yeah, and see, if I'm looking at it from this new system that they're walking us into, and to me, I can see how suddenly how you and me are, stacking our silver and gold right now. That option is, I think, soon going to be taken away from your average person.
Well, one just on physical amount of silver that's available. I mean, the British Royal Mint produced some data. I think I saw it on the YouTube channel, and the guy, his figure that he said was there's 2.5 ounces of silver per person on the planet in above ground physical silver, and that's not saying it's all available either.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I think a big mistake I hear a lot is people will say, like, they'll equate that all the silver that's been mined we still have, like that's still above ground and available. And
No,
that's
it's not.
like not even kind of.
I mean, if you look at that ratio, because the same research was shown that there's 1 ounce of gold per person on the planet. So the above ground ratio of physical metal is a gold silver is at a 2.5 to 1 ratio.
That's great.
We hear approximate figures of between 7 and 9 to 1 as a mining ratio.
Yep.
And I've always said, well, let's presume half of it goes to half of the silver. I mean, 70% goes to industry, but let's say half of the silver mined gets destroyed practically. That makes the ratio 4.5 to 1. But it would look like we've been destroying even more silver throughout human history.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if the actual ratio is 2.5 to 1, well, 2.5, I mean, heck, I mean, these have got 6 ounces in. It's like, and if you divide the yearly mine production, it works out about 1/8 of an ounce per person. So that math of 2.5 ounces per person would work out at 2.5 times 8. Is my math correct? No, 1/8 per person mined per year. So yeah, multiply that by 8. So it would be 16, 20. So that would say what we have above ground is about 20 years of current mine production. But we've been mining silver for 6,000 years, not at the same rate as we are now.
Yeah.
But either way, there is not enough, and hence why, I mean, I think you with your love and knowledge of ancient coins, I think I'm correct, and I'm saying that 1 ounce of silver used to be roughly 10 days labor. If you break it down into talents and
more, that's not even that much. It was more like a sestertius in the Roman times was like a week's wage or something like that. Which is like a quarter. I mean, it's not even, that's a quarter of an ounce or something like that. I mean, so it was,
and that was at a much lower, I guess, and that was at a much lower population, but it would have been much less silver because of the mining wouldn't have been anywhere near as extensive as it is now. But even if you say 1 ounce is 10 days of labor, I mean, what is the average day of labor in America? $80, $100?
Right.
So, I mean, say it's $50. I'm sure there's plenty of people who have to work a hard day and only get $50. Well, that would put silver at $500 an ounce. And from what you said, historically, silver would buy way more than 10 days of labor for an ounce.
Yeah.
So if we revert to that,
and that was monetary only. So, I mean, you probably had
Sure.
some other trinkets in silver, sure, but it was monetary.
Yeah, well, the bulk was, I think, wasn't it, in coin?
Yep. Yep.
Interesting fact. I don't think it's too much of a rabbit trail to go down. the Spanish economy went into hyperinflation and collapsed because they had too much silver and gold.
Yeah, I mean that can be. Yeah, I've heard of how you can suddenly get
because that was money, so they diluted their money because it was gold and silver, and they collected so much from around the world that it actually collapsed the Spanish economy. They basically there was so much they stopped making anything, just started buying stuff. So that's pretty parallel to what America has been doing with the privilege of being the reserve currency.
Exactly.
Our export was currency, and our import was real stuff.
Yes, and we have it's been dawning on me lately. So many, it's a financialized society. We've just papered over any problem, and therefore that's why suddenly services are really hard. Good services are hard to come by. Good products hard to come by. It's just because we keep financializing everything, and the hard good labor, the other side of what you're supposed to be, why you're supposed to earn in the first place, just goes away. It's just, and again, that but that pushes me in to see this bigger picture of being walked into this new programming to where, what if they're getting their underpinnings with gold based, around the world, country to country, they're getting set up so that they're secure. And then, populations, they'll work, they'll figure it out. I mean, some die, some live. I mean, I don't know that they care so. I mean, a lot of them, like you say, call for a reduction in the population.
Yeah. Do you want to pull up Wellco Services comment there about 2/3 of the world gets paid $2.50? That's, I think I've got some dimes. Should have some dimes in here. Yeah, I've got some old beat up ones. I don't know if that'll even show, but it is a dime. So that is a day's pay for 2/3 of the world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That it should be humbling, shouldn't it? How stupidly rich are we?
Yeah.
If you could take that to 2/3 of the world, you could employ someone for a day.
And especially that we just see, I mean, I was raised, and luckily I'm seeing it, and so that's good. But like, when you can just get the cash so easily, like you don't realize. And then we're putting it into something real, and I think that's very smart because of the huge deception that's behind all this. But on the other side of that, it is also why, it's a financialized economy, is like I'm saying. That's why you have such trouble when you go to the grocery store, or you try to get your car fixed, or the good labor for pay equivalent is just not there. You get, I don't know, it just goes away.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up not knowing that you didn't do everything. I just didn't know. I mean, I grew up, if my dad needed something doing on the house, he did it.
Yep.
And then when I was about 3-4 years old, I was working along helping him. If the car needed fixing, we did it.
Right.
It needed a clutch, we changed the clutch. If the chimney needed rebuilding, I went up the scaffold tower and I rebuilt the chimney. So for people who have to pay for goods and services, you're sort of screwed, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'm wondering with the robotics like they're trying to bring in, and their idea of these 15-minute cities and all this, like we were discussing, that is a possibility that's their big plan.
Sounds like a prison to me.
Totally. Yeah. and it wouldn't surprise me if,
because that means if you're in that, you're not going to be able to have a dog, are you? Or maybe you'll be able to have a tiny dog. Maybe, if you're really good. And then that'll all start going to social credits, won't it?
Well, it'll probably depend on what your carbon score is, right? Like if you have too much carbon, you can't get a dog to put out more carbon.
and I just realized fairly recently, America has a very strict social credit scoring system.
Yep.
It's called your FICO.
Yep.
If you're a good little citizen and you take out debt and you keep paying it back, and you keep taking out more debt and you keep paying it back, and then you keep taking out more debt, your credit score goes up. That's your reward for playing along in the system.
Yeah, and and since it's Fugazi anyway,
Yep.
see, they can just roll into. I think it's closer than a lot of people would understand it to be. Like they can just roll over into that system, and I mean, yeah, there's going to be some hiccups and whatnot, but it's not so far away from where we're at right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what is silver doing now? We are 33, 34. So that's pretty dramatic, isn't it? I think, and I don't think it's really started.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is silver is just looking better and better. It has been holding up quite well, I think, here of late. What do you? I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised at how well silver is holding up through some of these volatile things we're witnessing in the market and whatnot.
There has to be some big players, or the squeeze is tighter than we think already. So there's industry is bidding the price up to get their means of production. Although it's such a tiny market, it takes such a small amount of the fiat currency in existence, doesn't it? It's a fraction of a percent.
Yeah, and if we have all this fiat out there in these systems, and we're at, like Rick Rule says, half of 1% in the USA invested in precious metals.
That's by dollar amount.
So what if we just revert back to mean of like 3%, he says, and that's not at the end of the world fiat. I mean, it could be way more than that.
I mean, the mean used to be 8% or 10%. So, but what he's referring to there is assets under management. So there may be, there's probably maybe 5 or 10% of Americans actually have precious metals to some degree.
Assets under management, maybe I confuse on. Does that mean
that's where that 0.5% comes from? If you take up the total presumed value of gold and silver in bullion investment form, and you divide it into the amount of assets under management, so that's stocks, bonds, money market, it's cash, checking accounts, real estate, businesses. It's when you do that, you get the 0.5%. So there's a big distortion there. I think there's probably a lot more than 0.5% of the population.
I see.
I could be wrong. I hope there is.
Yeah, that makes sense though.
Because who are we going to trade? It's like at some point would need to get it into circulation to start, at least in local economies. And I'm saying that. I mean, I can buy bison meat now with silver. Sweet. I can buy firewood. I can buy honey. Sweet. I can buy mechanics time. Friend of mine, he's going to buy a whole house. He's getting a whole house built. I won't say where, in which state, but not. He's actually going to get a whole house built and pay for it in silver.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I have some back roots on things like that as well. So yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah.
I hope Wellco services that people will learn. And I started saying this 2-3 years ago. I think the greatest test of people who've managed to save up a fair amount of silver or silver and gold will be, what the heck do you do with that new purchasing power when all the people around you are in a whole world of pain?
Yeah, well, I think that's sadly even a best case scenario.
I mean, do half of us stackers and move to the dark side and become bankers? It's like, well, if or when this becomes currency again, the people who hold it become bankers, don't they? You become the bank.
Yeah.
So what does that? I don't know. LLC, there's just too much. Sometimes it's all too much, isn't it? Sometimes I want to just go for a walk with my dogs and pretend everything's fine.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit more to the too much is if I'm seeing some of what I think I'm seeing, and we go into this new system where it's they have their base, and we're on this new
Yep.
basic credit system, like CBDC credit type of
It
system.
will still be called the dollar.
Probably still called the dollar. However, the
Yeah.
things that we are buying and selling, even down to like vegetables, are also, they're talking about putting on like a distributed ledger type of system so that they're all tracked,
Yep.
accounted for.
Yep.
And
with AI, it'll be instantaneous with the huge data centers they're being built. So the control will be absolute. Will it be used absolutely in the beginning? No, but get the wrong people in government.
Yeah, right.
And it's not really the government that makes these decisions. I mean, they get to play around a bit, but they
Right.
really are told what they can and can't do.
I fully agree. And see, that's why
I mean, Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, he criticized Yellen for not transferring the short-term debt into long-term debt when it could have been done at a lower interest rate. But then I saw George Gammon, and he worked out, and I think he's correct, the reason the US government keeps issuing more and more short-term debt, that's the liquid in the plumbing in the world's financial system. It's short-term treasuries. That's what is used as currency en masse. And if you reduce the amount, you're starving the hungry beast of the fiat expansionary system. You're starving it of the lifeblood, which is ever more increasing units of currency. So the US government has to keep issuing short-term, whatever the cost, whatever the interest. And this is what is happening. Our Treasury Secretary is not issuing longer term and shifting the risk of the cost of servicing the debt.
Have you heard about the gold-backed longer-term debt, long bond that Judy Shelton or whatever has talked about? Have you heard anything about that?
So you give the government dollars, and in the future, you may or may not get some gold.
That's, to me, that was the one thing that jumped out at me, is like, well, during the Weimar,
give me the gold, give me the silver now. I don't want interest on it. I don't want to earn income on it. I just want it.
And at some way future time, right? Yeah, those were my thoughts exactly.
This is a continuous deception of return on principle. Money has to make money, has to make more money, has to make more money, has to make more money. Well, it can either make more money by creating the units of currency out of nowhere and stealing value from all the existing units, or money makes money by stealing money from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's interesting, see, because when I was listening to Judy Shelton talk about that, it was like, even she was admitting, well, when she first got into it, was, oh, we want gold back. And she's like, looking at how crazy the system is right now, you almost have to lend yourself to it. And like, you know, in her mind, I think that's what she was meaning. Like, you almost have to fall into their system and then try to bring it back into reality, maybe with that long-term bond. But it's just kind of backwards thinking in my mind, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting thought process anyway.
There's a good question. Do you want to pull that last comment up there?
Product can
gold silver that does not cost currency. Now, is this a riddle? Is there an answer? What other product can one own that does not cost currency? Product. I guess if you grow it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like commodities, like wheat.
If you grow, you know, and you do the work yourself, the seeds can be a tiny fraction of the value of what you grow. So, I mean, food is a product, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess if you take a raw material, say if you take old scrap pallets that you pick up for nothing and make furniture out of them, you've created something, haven't you?
Right, but it won't last like silver and gold, which is one of the great attributes that make
it can have utility, and it can have trading value, couldn't it?
Right, short time, yeah. Yeah, but that's why gold and silver is money in itself, just flat out, is because it has those best traits and qualities in which you would look for in a money.
But that, I mean, was it a happier society when we didn't have specialization and you had the blacksmith, you had the miller, you had the farmer?
Reality.
You always had the village idiot, but it was only one. There was only one person who was allowed to be an idiot in the village. Now it seems
Not
like
the whole society.
now it seems like there's too many.
No, yeah.
But, and even then, you had. I mean, people will take advantage of people, won't they? You know?
Yes, but the thing of like, it was so much more connected to reality at that point that
it was a harsh life.
It was, but there was reality was there at that time.
And maybe at least it was more real, more fulfilling, possibly. It's really hard to know, isn't it? I mean, I remember talking to my grandma, and she started work, I think at 14 years old, in the mills. Well, literally, they were called the Satanic Mills in the north of England, in the textile mills. So at 14, she started working. I watched a documentary about it, and they would have children from whole families would be indentured. So the whole family would basically be owned by the mill owner, and the children would be used to go in amongst the machines to sort out the tangles and reconnect the threads, the cords that got disconnected whilst the machine was running. And they would frequently get crushed or lose an arm, or
Oof, that's no good. Yeah.
So,
but it's interesting because I think for a lot of history, I mean, I worked my butt off when I was a kid, man. Like I worked like hard on the ranch. So
yeah.
And I think throughout, I mean, the further you go back, probably the more so that was almost. I mean, I worked hard, but at least I had like, the goods that the store, like you just had, I had a bottle of milk and a bottle of, all those goods were always there. Then that would have been probably more comfort than would have been in previous times.
Yep.
Like I was talking the other night, I believe it was with Space Miner, about, in biblical times when Joseph was in Egypt and his brothers and family were going through their hunger, the father of the other brothers was like, "Why do you guys stand here idle while we perish? Go to Egypt, go to another land and find us some food." And I was thinking, man, they had to saddle up their camels with not necessarily knowing if they were going to get anything when they got there, and how far they had to travel to get there. I mean, talk about how we just go to the store, and if you're like out of your favorite juice or milk, or that's a problematic. But I mean, talk about a different mindset on reality, right? Like, man. So yeah. Well, we're past an hour, so I suppose I should.
We better do Space Miner's comment. Let's finish on that one, because the hardest part. Yeah. So as I said earlier, I don't think there is a transition. I think the system has to collapse. Now, whether it's a complete collapse or a catastrophic complete collapse, I don't think it actually makes much difference. I just don't see how we can do it. Now, hopefully I'm wrong.
I can give you a quick briefing on
it. If you're 65 and you've worked a physical job all your life and your body just won't do that anymore, and you haven't got skills, and you're relying on a fiat system to keep you in your retirement, but they can't, what the heck do you do?
You take the stimulus. I'm telling you, man, we're going to walk in, and I think...
But what benefit would there be to the system then? Except...
They get complete control.
Is it a Hunger Games situation?
Yes, and yes. See what they're going to cause trade.
A certain quota has to die each week.
Well, to me, what if the trade imbalances and tariffs, what if this causes great havoc with our, because right now we're like on a, they call it a on, what do they call it, on day system or whatever. We're like, you get your groceries shipped to this supermarket that day, and if you don't get it, then you're
just in time.
Just in time. There you go. And so, okay, so if this new tariffs comes in and they causes havoc with our trade, and suddenly our goods that we're used to having aren't there.
Yep.
It's going to cause chaos. We're already in some wars. I just see this as being used as leverage to make the system chaotic. People are going to be hurting and wanting certain things, and they're going to say, look, we have new robots. We're going to come in on the system. We're going to track things so that there's no more waste. We're losing goods like Doge, like all this waste that we're looking at. See, all this waste.
Yep.
Well, they're going to say, we're going to lock it into this new computer system, track everything.
Right.
And I know people are struggling, so we're going to give some people the stimulus while we're going through these. This will just be a temporary thing while we work out these tariffs. And so you guys take this stimulus while we're here, see, and you just walked yourself into the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And it's game on. And I mean, no difference to the countries. They're going to do their thing while it's the people who are going to be in the hurt. But if you look at the big picture of like these WEFers and stuff, this is their, that's not outlandish for what they say.
No. Anyway, Space Miner. So why do we need instant transaction? Anyway, I mean, in a rural economy, you don't need instant transaction. Well, the transaction would be instant. I'll give you this quarter. You give me a pound of beef. That's instant, isn't it?
And it's real.
And it's real.
And that's important.
And it's harder to cheat on.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about money. Is it's supposed to be, you're supposed to get
and the bank isn't getting a cut of every transaction. I mean, even the new systems and all the crypto, the fees and the transaction charges, transaction charge in, transaction charge out, fee to turn it from USDT into dollars, fee to wire that, fees.
Hold it for a couple days for fees.
All the platforms are built on extracting as much income, taking a cut. Whereas this, it's made, issued, and that's it. There's no more cost, is there? And I guess the reason we've moved away from hard currency, especially metals, is the government. It's hard for the government to keep track and keep taking a piece of the action every transaction. So I quite like the idea of not being able to have instant transactions, because instant transactions means somebody's stealing somewhere. Someone's taking a cut and they're not doing the work. I mean, like if we sell a 1 ounce gold coin and we make $20 margin, that's less than 1% margin. And somebody wants to pay with card, our card processor charges us nearly 3%. Why the heck should the bank get 3% when I'm making 0.6% on a transaction? So instant transactions, I think they need to go away.
Well, it's definitely no good when you make a transaction and they decide a week or two later that they don't want to honor that transaction because there's no actual, it's a fugazi anyway. So it's like, oh, let's look at, that drives me nuts.
Yep.
Because, it's because it's not real value there. When, like you say, when you drop that dime in my hand, I then have the value and I walk away with it, transaction over.
Job done.
Each person walked away with their value and are happy.
So maybe the ideal is to develop communities where the instant transaction is a physical passing of a piece of silver, gold, copper, toilet paper, cigarettes, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that way you would tend to keep the wealth would stay in the community. But what happens is wealth on every transaction gets sucked out into the banking cartel, and it moves ever upwards
Yeah.
till the point where people are living paycheck to paycheck.
We're till where we're at today. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like Welchco here says, dark ages, ... It
Yeah,
happened recently.
I know. We've gone from periods of civilization into a breakdown, and probably starvation, plus local warlords and feuding.
Yeah, so these two little things right here I have in my hand are widow's mites.
Wow.
And you know, that's what in biblically, that's what that poorest lady dropped into the.
Are they copper?
Yep. Got those little anchor.
So the current value of those in commodity terms is pennies. It's not. It's maybe 3 cents, 4 cents of copper.
Yeah, I mean, yep. I mean, it's not the weight of a penny is probably. I mean, a modern copper penny is probably 3 of those.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, we had it. There was a point where this tiny little piece, and there's even points where they were cutting these in half.
Wow.
So I mean, that's a poor time there for a while.
But it would still buy something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess, you know, it's actually probably more valuable than our dollar is the funny thing about it. It actually probably held better.
Yeah, I think Space Miners nailed it there. You always need 2 real people with 2 real goods to make a real transaction. Yeah.
That's what somebody asked Rick Rule if he liked how Trump was doing business or something, and Rick said, well, I don't like it because when I do business, I like to make a deal where when people walk away from the deal,
both are happy.
Both sides are happy.
I've heard him say that so many times.
Okay. It was the first time I heard it the other day. I was like, oh, I like that. So.
Yeah. But I've also heard him say when he invests in someone or something that he will always like the outcome.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
he doesn't mind if the person who borrows the money, if it goes wrong,
he's always
Rick will always be okay.
Yeah, no doubt, right? That guy's mind, it always kind of reminds me, I don't know why I shouldn't probably say that. I like him, and I like that he's so open and tells people things and he doesn't have to, and so I appreciate that. But I mean, you can tell he's a wolf under that suit. You can tell, you know, he's like vicious.
He's very honest. He says he's white, overweight, old, overprivileged. And that seems to be what's happened in the Western world, isn't it? It's old, white males seem to own everything and run everything.
Yep.
And we're not doing a very good job of it. And I say, yeah, I'm 60 this year, so I don't know. I don't. Hopefully, I don't boss anybody around. I don't have any employees. You'd probably have to ask my wife. She'd be a better judge of my character than I am.
Well, you don't look 60, man. So you're doing.
No, I mean about bossing people about. I've tried that when I was doing construction, and it never ends well. But yeah, I'm almost tearing up thinking. I am tearing up thinking about the struggles that are ahead for a lot of people. It didn't have to be this way, but it is this way.
Yep, that's the thing. Got to kind of realize that it's reality, no matter how frustrated you are with it. So
yeah,
deal with it the best you can, and
we do the best you can, and in the community, you know. And I think that a lot of us will have to step up and do more in our neighborhood, because that does become contagious. I'm sure, you know.
Yeah. Yep. Space Miner says, in fairness, metal is often supplemental to a trade.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Animals. Yeah. And that's my argument, actually, to all these other tries that they had with like seashells, or it was just a local area that didn't have gold and silver on hand. And so you use the next.
You use something that was of finite supply. Yeah.
And I agree on that. Yep. Oh, so yeah, I got a video coming out from that I interviewed Harlan Burke, and he was telling me in that interview that John Quincy Adams here was an ancient coin collector himself.
Okay.
So I did not know that, and I had actually bought this particular 1 ounce bar at a local coin shop here when I met Cranky Stacker the week after I got home from Chicago visiting Harlan. And I picked this up just because I liked the look of it.
Yeah.
And I was editing my interview, and Harlan said in there that this guy was an ancient coin collector. I'm like, oh, I'm keeping this now. So anyway, there's some side info for you.
Nice bar.
I thought so. It was kind of cool looking. I did have it up for sale, but I want to keep it now. All right. Well, what do you got for deals, Ian, before we get out of here?
Oh, we've always got deals. Eagles, $3.99.
Nice.
Maples, $2.50. Yes, that's not an error. $2.50 premium on Maples.
That might be a good deal if the tariffs kicks in, huh?
Yeah, I'm not going to sell too many at that.
Have you heard much on the tariffs with?
Yeah, I mean, the first, was it a month ago, the first threat, and then they were withdrawn. A lot of wholesalers stopped ordering from Royal Canadian Mint. Some never picked up ordering. Others did get a little bit in the last few weeks. And I think with this, it seems to be hotting up pretty dramatically with Canada now, doesn't it? I don't know. I don't know how this problem goes away. My concern with silver is when you look at how much silver we get from Canada and Mexico is, you know, as just for the industrial use, if that gets turned off, wow, hardly anything can get made in America again. It's like, unless the government comes for our silver, I guess. So yes, it's had an effect on the supply of maples.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You think that so that people have quit ordering it just kind of till they figure out what's going on?
On the risk of it being at customs and a 25% tax slapped on it that they can't possibly pass on to the end buyer. I mean, typically the wholesalers make 20 cents at the moment an ounce margin. So that's 20 cents on a $33, $34, $35 product. If you put 25% tariff on that, that's like 10. So instead of making 20 cents profit, they'll lose $9.80.
Well, obviously they're going to pass that on.
They're not going to risk that. Well, it wouldn't sell, you see. Well, nobody would buy a maple with a $18 or $12 whatever premium. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some companies out there who actually do charge that. I know, but they're
right. Till the price starts ripping, and then I was watching Keith Neumeyer talk just a little with Daniela. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but I mean they bring a lot of silver into the U.S.
Yeah,
and yeah, he hasn't brought any in yet since the talks got going. But boy, if that gets shut off, that's going to make a difference too. Bulls, I mean that's big news for us.
I've said many times, if Mexico really was smart, they would pay off all of the foreign mining companies. They'd give them double what their current stock price is, and then they would put on furlough all of the Mexican workers on the same pay, and they would say we're going to start mining silver again when it's $300 an ounce. They'd only have to wait a month. If Mexico just turned off their silver.
Right.
Now, I said that, and people said, oh, yeah, but it'd be retaliation. Well, what's this tariff war anyway?
Yeah.
If you're in a war with somebody, you're going to start looking around, what weapons have I got to hand on you?
Right.
I mean, Canada could say, okay, no more potash.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's 90% of American use of potash comes from Canada.
Yeah.
They could say no more high-grade nickel, no more electricity. That's 1.5 million people will be short of electricity. On and on. And it's all very well saying, yeah, we don't need Canadian lumber. Well, we do. Unless we cut down the giant redwoods, but they're too big to mill into lumber. So I guess we could just clear cut Yellowstone and all of Washington.
Yeah. Well, we got, I don't know.
Cut it all down, I guess, and turn it into 2x4s. What's the downside in that? I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
Well,
the lumber would be the least of my. I mean, I can see how we might get away with.
No, but the lumber, because it's already shifted up, because you might well slow down or reduce the amount of Canadian lumber coming in, but the American producers of lumber will charge more for theirs because they can. And I think the bulk of the large mills in the US are owned by Canadian firms. So they'll make more. They'll make out like bandits.
There you go. That's funny.
You know, so I think it's a dangerous, very dangerous, unpredictable world we're entering into.
Well, I think that's kind of what I think. I think that's why. Like, I think that's the point of it. Believe it or not, I know that wouldn't come to your eye right away, but from my point of view, I've kind of been pointing to that for a while, saying, you know. So it makes sense. It makes sense to me, I guess, in that way. So yeah, the handy thing is with Keith Neumeyer, he's got that new first mint.
Yep.
And he's minting silver, and I believe that's in the U.S., right? Nevada or Utah or somewhere.
They're near, down in Arizona, is that?
Somewhere like that, yeah. And I think he was, so hopefully that'll be a way to keep some silver flowing anyway. But yeah, I mean, that could be big. That could be big news, man. If we lose Mexico and Canada on silver, that could be a game changer right there. Yeah,
that's nearly half of the silver. And if we start or extend the War of Europe, that's your Philharmonics and your Britannias. Although I think some Britannias are actually made in the US. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a drastic shortage of retail silver, and that's sort of happening anyway. It has been getting sucked up into the wholesalers, and then they send it to the refiners, and the refiners turn it into 1,000-ounce bars, and those 1,000-ounce bars are feeding industry. So there has been a destruction of retail silver and gold.
Yep. How are your other metals looking? The new metals you've been looking into?
Yeah, the rhenium. We've sold a lot of rhenium.
Cool.
Where Jesse Dyer Commodity Culture is doing a documentary for us.
Oh, nice.
We had a show came out today on commodity culture and got quite a few inquiries about rhenium from that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fascinating that. That's a kilo.
And that goes for
2,500 at the moment. We've got a little bit left at 2,500. Silver at the moment. What's a kilo of silver?
Do you break that down, Ian, or do you have to buy?
Yeah, no, we do quarter kilos, half kilos, and kilos.
Okay.
So a kilo of silver times 2.15. So a kilo of silver is around $1,100. So it's only just over twice the price of silver. Yeah. 1/500th is the production, 50 tons against 25,000 tons of silver. Okay. So its scarcity is hard to comprehend. I've got
is crazy.
I've got a 20-ounce bar somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Managed to get this. This is just a plain bar, which is pretty well 20 ounces. So if you stacked up
cool.
80,000 of those, that's the whole annual mine production.
Wow.
It would fit on a kitchen table.
And then what was your other metal that we was looking for that thing? Oh, zirconium.
I'm looking at the others, but I'm concentrating on rhenium. It's the easiest play at the moment with the very fixed output being a byproduct of a byproduct. No rhenium mines, no rhenium deposits. It's not found on its own in nature. So I just like that its uses are very high value uses. So the demand is not price sensitive, and the supply isn't price sensitive. You can't increase the supply as the price goes up.
So what was that? How much was that bar again? I'm sorry, I had too many things.
This isn't for sale. I managed to get this from a recycler. Very few companies can actually produce this because you have to get it up to over 3,000. I think it's 3,180 centigrade is the melting point. So there's hardly anybody that can do that cost effectively.
So if I was to buy, I would need to break down one of those jars of the pellets kind of.
Yeah, we do these in quarter kilos, half kilos, and kilos.
So for easy metal, what would a quarter kilo be like? $600 and some $700.
$625. Yeah.
$625. Cool.
Doesn't look pretty. This is the cheapest way of putting it into a solid form. Sintered pellets.
How is it? Do those break apart, or is it really hard?
I mean, you look in the bottom of the jar. There's a few little bit,
little bit. But
will if you bash them about. They're at 90% density. It's just the lowest cost way of turning the refined rhenium powder into a solid.
Sure. Okay.
Because in a powder. Any powdered metal is not a good idea. I mean, give you an example, powdered aluminum will self-combust.
Really?
Yeah. Well, where I used to live in England, there was a plant that used powdered aluminum in their concrete block manufacturing. Used it as an additive, and one night the barrels of the powdered aluminum caught light and it burnt the factory down. Just
So, but that can melt. That obviously that melts with other metals. Can it be melted itself into like a bar, or?
Yeah, I mean, find somebody who can get these to over 3,180 centigrade. Theoretically, it could be
melts into a bar,
cast into bars, and this is being rolled.
Okay.
So that some very high end uses use the rhenium in this pure form. It would be fun to get some bars made. I know people like.
I wonder if it would be brittle or what.
No, it's incredibly workable and ductile. You can anneal it and work it. We're just learning. I've got a little piece. I've been just trying to polish it. It's incredibly hard to polish, but it does shine up beautifully.
Nice, cool. Broke says hottest rated refractory I worked on was 3,300 incinerator temps.
That's what I need. I need one of those in the backyard. So broke stacker. If you got one of those furnaces, I need one. That sounds really dangerously hot.
No doubt. But that isn't even touching the osmium vapor.
Well, that's the boiling point.
Okay.
So rhenium, it's only this stuff. Only tungsten has a higher melting point than rhenium.
Okay. All right. Well, good show. We're over time. Appreciate you coming out. Have to get you back in here again. What? Any parting words? Anything you want to leave people with?
Oh my. I guess keep calm and carry on.
Right. All right, cool. Well, Ian, I sure appreciate you coming up, and hopefully we'll get you back here in another week or two, and we'll do this again.
Thank you.
All right, everybody out in chat. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we will catch you all on the next one.